So welcome back to another episode, and today
I'm going to have to talk about WWE again.
Even though I don't want to keep talking about the WWE, but I am tired of allowing WWE to live rent-free in my mind. I will be called an AEW shill by people who watch this and disagree with what I'm saying, to which I say, great, go right ahead. You do you. I don't care anymore. I'm going to fill the desires of my echo chamber, and you will shout back from the outside. And so we will continue to play this parasocial game where I make videos about successful people I don't like, and you continue to yell at me about how liberal I am. And so the cycle will continue indefinitely, eternally. Even though I am deeply suspicious of democracy as a guiding principle, but don't get it twisted. The only thing more cringe than supporting democracy is trying to impress these dorks. Last year, Netflix initiated what I'll call phase 1 of their corporate synergy strategy with the WWE. They released the documentary Mr. McMahon, which functioned both as a historical document to catch up the casuals of all the notable things that have happened in the company since the 80s, but perhaps more importantly to distance themselves from former owner Vince McMahon, establishing his son-in-law as the new guy in charge. The guy who has supposedly turned around his father-in-law's ineptitude. It should come as no surprise that I believe this to be an overt strategy to cover up the same institutionalized rot that has plagued pro wrestling since McMahon monopolized professional wrestling in the 1980s. The lie, or should I say myth, that WWE sells to you is that they were the company who brought pro wrestling out of the shameful, smoke-filled bingo halls and into the arenas and stadiums. The reality is that there were multiple interpretations of pro wrestling in the 80s and well before that, and they were all huge. You had Mid-South, which featured barbaric blood feuds. You had Mid-Atlantic and Georgia Championship Wrestling, which both showcased a more gritty and grounded style of pro wrestling that Southerners affectionately called wrasslin'. Ric Flair was the guy in Mid-Atlantic, so you can say that Flair represented the gritty wrasslin' type of pro wrestling fan. Then you had the sports entertainment flavored flair of the WWE, located in New York. Vince was able to purchase WWE from his father in the early 80s for a sweet deal, and thus ensure he'd become, like all successful businessmen, incredibly lucky due to his father's influence, but also his rugged individualism, or what he'd brand in the mid-2000s as ruthless aggression. Vince went to all the territories in the United States and bought off the cable TV stations who were airing the competition's product because he had the funds to do so. Now, it should be said here that I do believe another promoter would have seized this opportunity if Vince hadn't lucked into buying the company from his rather naive father. I mean, his dad used to operate via handshake contracts in which your word was your bond. Could you imagine that? Do you know Hulk Hogan, the guy who could finally say he's buried... That guy worked for Chicago's AWA, or the American Wrestling Association. Due to exposure from Rocky III, Hogan was quickly becoming a huge deal in wrestling. So Vince and Hogan cut a deal for a shit ton of money behind the Chicago promoter's back. And next thing we knew, Hulk Hogan was in the WWF. With Vince airing his product in all the other territories, the promoters could do nothing about it, and so wrestlers were left with two options: either work for Vince or be out of a job. Territories were completely gone by the 90s. But Vince McMahon didn't just destroy the territories, he deterritorialized wrestling itself, stripping it of region, culture, and community. What he gave back was the WWE, a new map where the only territory that matters is Vince's vision. You see, WWE doesn't want you to know that pro wrestling didn't begin with WWE. There's a concept in late capitalism, and I acknowledge now that this is very jargon-heavy, philosophical mumbo-jumbo, but there's these terms deterritorialization and re-territorialization, which are a mouthful. I should have gotten a water or a pop this time. I have nothing. I'm just raw dogging it. Now, I'm not going to bore you with who came up with this concept because it doesn't matter, but I do think it's important to illustrate what has happened here. So let's give an example. Now, the process by which these things move under capitalism is key. The big takeaway here is to understand how capitalism continues to thrive by finding ways to reinvent itself through vicious contradictions. Deterritorialization is when something escapes its old structure. Reterritorialization is when it's captured and absorbed into a new one. That's really all you need to know. It's not that difficult. I'll use yoga as an example because pro wrestlers need to stretch, right? In its original form, yoga was a spiritual and physical discipline that arose out of Hindu and Buddhist traditions. Yoga was a tool to achieve liberation and peace from within, to let go of what you can't control. But under late capitalism, yoga became a westernized commodity where you become fit and then post selfies to Instagram for clout. And honestly, if you're the type of person to do this, the only appropriate response is, we'll cut that sentence. The territory from which it emerged, be it Far East Asia or South Asia, gets erased or deterritorialized and then reterritorialized in the West, now repurposed into gyms and apps. I mean, all the tech bros in Silicon Valley align with Western Buddhism, right? McMahon was able to implement this violent restructuring because of the conditions of neoliberalism, which is a nasty term that triggers a ton of people, but if you don't know, you can basically, use it interchangeably with late capitalism. Neoliberalism creates the conditions where profit is the highest moral good. Nothing more, nothing less. It is the mode in which dominance in the form of monopoly can take place, and then you can tell your side of the story, which is to just blatantly lie or myth make and say that wrestling was a small and shameful thing before WWE came around to save it and rebrand it as the less shameful sports entertainment. Vince was always obsessed with becoming more adjacent to Hollywood. Why else do you think he always begged celebrities to show up on WrestleMania? And why he often gave big spots to actors over his loyal talent? This should come as no surprise, but under late capitalism, monopolies only work with leaders who are cold-blooded and profit-driven. Sociopaths, American psychos, and to anyone who believes Triple H isn't that, I'll direct your attention to the Royal Rumble 2024 press conference in which he was asked about his father-in-law's sex trafficking allegations, and instead of responding to the question like a normal person with compassion, he answered,
"We just had an amazing week."
Now, does that sound like a compassionate, normal, or functioning member of society?
Rock joining our board. We just sold out the Royal Rumble, put 48,000 people in the Tropicana Field.
I choose to focus on the positive.
So, to sum up, Vince deterritorialized wrestling by destroying the mafia-like territory system, shitting on handshake contracts, and ensuring a monopoly in pro wrestling. His way or the highway, baby. Sports entertainment all the way. And in the process, he made wrestling much, much smaller, which is why most people have moved on to other hobbies and forms of entertainment. In 2022, Triple H became the luckiest man in wrestling. After suffering a cardiac event the same week CM Punk debuted for AEW in the summer of 21, Paul Levesque had a much smoother 2022. His father-in-law was busted for sex trafficking allegations, and suddenly the book was given to him. Vince was out. Gone were the days of incoherent booking from an out-of-touch and senile old man, replaced by a middle-aged man who had common sense. But that common sense was going to uphold the highly corporate values of Titan Towers, namely micromanagement and advertising. I said in the first part of the video that the McMahon documentary was phase 1 of the Netflix and WWE merger. Phase 2 is the victory lap of Unreal, a peek behind the curtain that is designed to showcase how the sausage is made. And so it is made and watched mostly by Triple H, Bruce Pritchard, and Ed Koskey, and also Michael P.S. Hayes is there to kind of show everyone, oh, the company isn't as corporate as you think it is. We got some buttoned up straight shooters backstage. Unreal is there to show the sad reality of the WWE in 2025. That nothing happens without the go-ahead of the writers in charge because you are always being watched and evaluated. And after every match, every wrestler has to return to Gorilla and give a ritualistic handshake to Triple H, thanking him for the opportunity. Unreal shows us who is actually in charge, and while the face isn't as nasty as it once was, it's still a face that makes me suspicious and bored. Vince didn't just consolidate power when he re-territorialized wrestling. He redefined the rules of engagement, aesthetic language, and even the fans' role. It used to be a communal experience tied to local pride, became a global product tied to corporate identity. Triple H is just the next in line in an endless line of successors. And yeah, higher-ups in the company have openly voiced their support for MAGA, including Triple H and Roman Reigns. Roman Reigns, coming out as a person of color who supports MAGA, is a huge win for WWE's perception. You can't accuse Triple H of white supremacy when one of your biggest stars is a person of color. You can no longer say that the WWE is a white supremacist ideology when so many people of color work for them. And you can, but it's not going to get you very far, not in 2025. Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson is on the board of directors. And yes, I am definitely hoping that Dwayne and Trips eventually, their whole beef will eventually be the thing to implode this godforsaken company. Hey, a man can dream, right? This is kind of an aside, but it's just really, really sad to see Joseph Park, aka TNA's The Abyss, so thoroughly horrified to lose his job after that first Raw on Netflix main event between CM Punk and Seth Rollins. Apparently they had too much stuff planned and it was gonna go long, and Bruce Pritchard kind of gives him like the stink face afterwards, and the Abyss is just like, I'm so sorry sir, like, you are one of the most base pro wrestlers of like the number 2 company in the early aughts, and you're sitting here telling a man who has never set foot in the ring how sorry you are. Like, where are we at? This would be like if Mick Foley came back to the WWE time and time again and was constantly getting undermined and cucked and disrespected. Oh wait, why is everybody who works for this company become such a simp for the company? I don't get it. WWE is currently in this period of sports entertainment supremacy where every little thing about a pro wrestler is micromanaged. And I know that I use him a lot because he is my favorite pro wrestler, but I think it's an interesting case. CM Punk was fired from the smaller upstart promotion AEW and then kind of had to tuck his tail between his legs and bow down and kiss the ring of Paul Triple H Levesque, somebody who he notably couldn't stand when he was during his first stint with the WWE. Triple H was, you could argue, literally the number one reason why Punk left WWE in the first place. But they have since kissed, hugged, and made up. Punk has returned to the WWE to make money and change the perception that he's difficult to work with. And by all accounts, he's done both of those things. The talent seems to genuinely look up to him and respect him in a way that a lot of the younger guys in AEW didn't, and that definitely got under Punk's skin and a lot of fan skin as well. I do find it cringe and hypocritical that a man who calls himself Punk would make such a corporate sellout gesture, but he remains open about his politics. Punk is openly pro-LGBTQ, even in the Trump-pilled WWE. So in a sense, I'm kind of happy he's there to help steer the ship despite having absolutely zero interest in any of his creative. He even admits how little creative control he has now, except when he's in the ring having a match, but even then, everything he's doing is being closely monitored and evaluated by middle-aged white men in the back who are into one very specific form of wrestling, and it's the one that's ashamed to call itself pro wrestling. In perhaps the saddest moment of Unreal, we see an emotional Punk backstage before his night one main event match against Roman Reigns and Seth Rollins. He and Hunter embrace. Punk says perhaps the most depressing thing I've ever heard come out of his mouth. Paul says, "You've always been a main event guy." And Punk responds, "I know. It's just moving to me to know that you know that too." So after all these years, after calling the man a doofus son-in-law, the guy who made him leave the company, this is the validation you need now? There are two types of CM Punk fans. The ones who like and appreciate him because he's hot and a diva who knows how to stir up shit better than most. And then there are the fans who adulate him because they genuinely believe him to be a catalyst for change or revolution. So when I make fun of Seth Rollins for labeling himself a revolutionary, I am no better if the reason CM Punk is my favorite wrestler is because I unironically believe against my better intuition that CM Punk is a revolutionary with principles. Though I do also find him quite attractive as a straight white heteronormative man. But then that was all killed when he returned to WWE and said the infamous words I will never forget.
I'm not here to make friends, I'm here to make money.
As sad as this is to see unfold, it's kind of beautiful in its own warped way. The Pipe Bomb and Summer of Punk was never about building a new foundation. Not really. It was about CM Punk. He became the hottest act in the company because he was genius enough to see that the last pay-per-view before his contract was up took place in Chicago. So he pretty much slotted himself into the main event against the biggest pro wrestler at the time, John Cena. He was a guy that the company never had before, a guy who was openly critiquing the system on live television and saying everything that jaded fans like me have been saying for years, and literally the reason I stopped watching wrestling for so long. This is a guy who walked away from the machine because it made him sick and crushed his dream of being a pro wrestler, and now he's giving the man who he hated most credit for reigniting it once more. It hurts even more when you look back on his rather brief time in AEW and just how good it was. CM Punk returned to the empire he once walked out on and got what he wanted, a half main event and a hug from the man who held him down. He cried not because he was vindicated, but because he was finally allowed to belong. And as much as I hate seeing Triple H win again, I can't be mad at Punk for getting his dream if this was his dream. I do genuinely hope Punk is okay and is happy and more stable now that he's back with the company he seems to prefer. But I don't know, I still think that's up in the air, and I do hope that one day he does return to AEW because I think he needs them and vice versa, even though that's probably a spicy take. But I don't know, I'll always remember the Ring of Honor interview in 2005 before he was going to leave for WWE that summer. He did what he did with Samoa Joe, where Punk is just kind of, you can tell he's ready to move up. He sees going to WWE as a promotion and a sense of legitimacy. Of course, the WWE can't function without the participation and wallets of their fans, the WWE universe. This is such a sensitive topic for me because I have friends who are ride or die fans of the company, but I can't help but cringe thinking about how much time they spend watching WWE content. Yes, that is definitely my elitism showing, but instead of judging them, I want to understand why, but I don't think the reason is all that complicated. I mean, there are definitely WWE fans who have a warped perception of pro wrestling thanks to the propaganda machine of the WWE, especially the ones who have Tony Khan derangement syndrome, where they hyperfixate on every single thing the guy does and calls it terrible. And I acknowledge I do sound like that type of person when I've made multiple videos now critiquing Triple H and the WWE system at large. The reason I do is because I so passionately disagree with your number one goals being driving profits, and that being your number one goal at the expense of everything else, your humanity, the women on your roster, compassion, empathy. I mean, I know I'm moralizing here, but I mean, sometimes you got to do the right thing. I think it's a bit tactless and mean-spirited to call tired and overworked wrestling fans bots, which is what AEW fans and anti-WWE fans will do. And then guys like Paul Levesque take advantage of these people by these overworked people by supplying them with endless content he claims to have meaning. I mean, WWE puts on between 10 to 12 hours of content every week, and that's not even counting the weekends when they have premium live events. The WWE universe are working class people, I would imagine. Vast majority of them are, and they're kind of outsourcing their imagination to an algorithm. And with the creation of AEW, legitimate number 2 challenger promotion, the fans who used to critique them like me have moved on. They don't watch the product anymore. But the fans who have remained and are ride or die don't question the product. I don't think they're passive because they're dumb or blind. They're exhausted, animized, and trained to find catharsis in the emotional cues WWE provides, like, this is awesome, which AEW also does, I'll acknowledge. Or every time they go crazy when somebody who hasn't been around for 6 months to a year returns and then has no storyline after 2 weeks. Or cry for Cody when he finishes the story. I'll get to him. They've trained their crowd to respond like a Pavlovian dog, a corporate call and response machine where all emotional energy is fed back into the brand. WWE provides a service to the WWE universe. Overworked poor people looking for meaning in a society with no unions, a precarious job market, and no communal myth, so WWE provides that myth for them. It's like how in sitcoms the tired and overworked construction guy can just plop down on the couch and let the canned laughter do the work for him. In the attention economy, the WWE universe are victims of manufactured chaos. Basically, Triple H is trying to recreate what made Hogan versus The Rock at Toronto in 2002 so memorable, but the conditions for that match were only possible in 2002. For it to happen as organically as it did, which could only happen once, you needed a contrarian crowd like the Bizarro World Canadian crowd. Because remember, Canadians rarely get to see mainstream wrestling. My point is that Hogan, Rock, and even Vince McMahon couldn't have foreseen how the Canadian crowd were going to react to a seemingly washed NWO-pilled Hogan. So the two men just went with the crowd and improvised. The Rock, who was a face at the time, played it up as a heel, and Hogan, for the first time in a decade, got to play the hero, albeit an anti-hero in the WWE. Who cheats? In a bizarre sort of way, 2002 Hogan kind of provided the blueprint for lie, cheat, and steal Eddie Guerrero. But in the post-McMahon WWE, every performer is overbooked, overexposed, and overexerted, which is why we need to talk about moments. WWE's ensure that the WWE Universe will always return regardless of who it is they bring back. In the main event of SummerSlam 2025, Cody Rhodes defeated John Cena, regaining the WWE Championship he'd lost to Cena at WrestleMania. Cena gets a moment in the ring to appreciate the adulation of the WWE Universe. He's soaking it in. His heel turn was a failure. The guy who is close friends with Vince McMahon just doesn't have what it takes to get people to genuinely boo him. And so a new moment must be made. That gotcha, something to bring the fans back. Brock Lesnar's music hits. The crowd goes wild. The same crowd who had vociferously booed the shit out of the mention of Donald Trump earlier in the night. Brock Lesnar has been gone for 2 years. He was let go after being implicated in the Vince McMahon sex trafficking scandal. Some people believe Brock has done nothing illegal. At least nothing that can be proven. Others believe he shouldn't be with the company because of overwhelming evidence of a married man who at best only sexted with another woman and at worst was offered multiple times to have sex with her in order to keep him happy while in the company. Whatever side you believe, WWE has never addressed the accusations against Brock, and they never had to. This is a company with a long, and I do mean long, history of sex trafficking allegations. This is not the first time. So if you're part of the latter group, you know how much of a fuck you this moment was. Work or shoot, I'll leave that for you to decide. For me, it was, I hope, the final straw. I didn't watch any of SummerSlam live. I watched the Punk match and then I watched the main event because I heard they were good. And yeah, when Brock Lesnar returned, I felt nothing. Not anger, not sadness, just pure, oh yeah, this company who thinks like artificial intelligence and treats their fans like artificial intelligence. They can manipulate by having just enough interesting moments to keep them around. Yeah, just another predictable moment to capture fans' attention until they need another moment a few months down the line. I've mocked the notion that a CM Punk or a Seth Rollins could be revolutionary, but I've got to mention Cody Rhodes, the Coatster, the American Nightmare, the guy who once took a sledgehammer to a throne at AEW's inaugural premium live event, only to return to the company who chewed him up and spit him out and proclaimed Triple H to be his favorite wrestler. Cody Rhodes isn't a revolutionary. He's Hogan with a neck tattoo. Like Hogan in the 80s, like Austin and Rock in the 90s, and like Reigns and Cena in the 21st century, he postures as the people's champion because when it comes to addressing the moral failures of his company, he would rather protect them than tell the truth. Or perhaps the sad reality is that this is Cody Rhodes' truth. Ignorance. Cody Rhodes was asked about bringing Brock Lesnar back, to which you get the predictably lifeless, corporate-coded non-answer. The answer that'll ensure he keeps making a ton of money at the expense of the safety and security of women in pro wrestling spaces. He is an NCAA champion. He is a UFC champion. He certainly fits. So what is Brock Lesnar then? An exceptional athlete who can do despicable things and get away with it because he's exceptional at what he does? I should probably say I'm disappointed in Cody, but I'd be lying if I said I was surprised. A man who has had opportunity after opportunity to speak up as the company's top guy right now. What's the worst that could happen to him? If he's such a big star, WWE would have no choice but to keep booking him because he's a big moneymaker for them. The American Nightmare indeed, because you have to be asleep in order to believe it. The reality is that Cody Rhodes has to follow the WWE programming because he's not actually that big of a star. If he was that big of a star, he could say whatever the hell he wanted and WWE would have no choice but to swallow their pride. Either that or they'd finally implode from within, but no one employed in this company says a single negative thing about them because there will be consequences. The company said it was done with press conferences the night before Brock Lesnar's big return, which is funny because the company had basically already vetted all of the dick riders who would only ask Hunter softball questions after the show. But it's another rather obvious statement, the most cowardly and apathetic one. Silence. Pure, unadulterated silence. So maybe now, in a rare moment of self-care, I can proudly say from this moment on, I will not be making another video about this godforsaken company. I used to think WWE could be saved if in the right hands, but I now understand the rot is the roots. Go watch. This isn't some go watch AEW message either. Honestly, I haven't watched modern wrestling at all in 2025, and I gotta say I've been enjoying myself a hell of a lot more. So yeah, that's it. That's the video. If you're fed up with endless advertising and micromanaging and bootlicking, there's other hobbies out there. It's never been an easier time to quickly become obsessed with something. So I'll end on this. Fuck WWE. Fuck the WWE. Fuck a WWE. Fucking WWE. Fuck the WWE. Creepy ass bitches. Thanks for watching.